Welcome to the SJS1 Podcast, recorded on December 10th, 2021. SJS1 is a media and technology platform developed as a grassroots effort by dedicated youth sports leaders from South Jersey to provide content covering topics from coaching education to sports technology, sports medicine, to our standout players, coaches, parents. Subscribe to SJS1 on YouTube, Facebook, and Apple Podcasts. Today, we have Leigh Povia and Clayton on the SJS1 Podcast to talk with us about play therapy, trauma-informed treatment, neurofeedback, parent-player, coach behavior, and other topics. Leigh Povia is a licensed clinical social worker, registered play therapist, and board certified in neurofeedback. Clayton is a neurofeedback technician. Both are at the Center for Dynamic Growth. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome to the show, Leah and Christian.
Thank you, Keith.
So thank you both for having us. And thank you for that introduction, Mark. Yes, my name is Leigh Povia and I own Center for Dynamic Growth. I have spent, sadly, a very long time, longer than I'd like to admit, working with children and families, and really sort of honing in on how relationships affect child development, affect who we become as adults, as well as looking at trauma and how trauma can affect our developing brain and who we are and how we interact in the world. And so I love that I get to come and talk about it and hopefully add a little bit of my flair to the conversation. But in addition to that, I'm also a mom, and I'm a mom of a student athlete. She was a high-level gymnast and is now a diving, extraordinaire. I'm the mom, so I get to say that, right? But so I have both the clinical side of it as well as the parenting side of it. So thank you for having me and Christian.
Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you.
So I'd like to, if it's okay with you, I would like to sort of bounce some questions off of Christian, because he also was an athlete throughout his
My whole life, pretty much, till soon.
Okay.
And so I thought that might be a good way to sort of help people learn from the athlete's perspective.
Excellent.
I think it's a great idea.
Cool.
Great. All right, Christian, are you ready?
I'm ready when you are.
So help me understand, I know as a mom, I want to know how to best support my daughter. And I don't always get it right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd really like to understand what are some ways from I guess an athlete's perspective, but also from someone that's not my kid, right? Yeah. I'd like to know or understand a little bit about what I can do best to help support her, but also what I might be doing to maybe hinder the process.
Mm-hmm.
So like the first question I'd like to start off with would be like, what's most helpful or supportive to an athlete that maybe your parents did to help you to succeed?
It's a good question. So I was very lucky. My parents were at my games, my practices, making sure I got to my practices, making sure I was all set to go. I think the biggest thing when it comes down to getting the most out of your kid is being present, understanding that, the kid's interested in the sport, especially at a young age. So the kids are looking around in the stands at all times. I mean, even when they're playing the game, practices, they're still looking in the stands to see if the parent's there. I know every athlete that's a kid can vouch for that. I would say emotional support as well. Getting your kid to, or letting your kid know he's doing a good job, making sure he has everything to be prepared for the game or practice, I would say is huge, but definitely being present.
You use that word twice, and I'd like to differentiate a little bit. What does it mean to be present?
Mm.
I mean, there's a lot of parents who are there, does that mean they're present?
No, that's not necessarily true. I think being involved, actually knowing what's going on. I think a big part about the sport is having the parent understand about the sport, not just kind of like throwing your kid out there on the field or ice or wherever, not actually knowing what's going on around them. But being, I would say, involved.
So like also not being on their cell phone or
right,
something
exactly.
like while the kid is
Yep.
competing.
especially in like practices are not the most fun, the most entertaining. But I mean, at a game, just try to stay off your cell phone the best you can. Like I said, the kid is looking in the stands at you. I'm telling you, every single kid is looking in the stands, whether their parent is there or not, they're looking.
I can't tell you how many times my daughter said, "Oh, did you see that?" And I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I missed it."
Mhm.
So if those are some of the ways to best support them, I guess, so what were some of the things that maybe could have been changed about the way your parents parented regarding sports?
Again, I was lucky. So my parents were there. I can't even count how many times they may have missed a game due to work or an illness or stuff like that. But my parents were very, how would you put it? They told me if I was doing something wrong. They were very critical of how I played, if I played bad, if I played good. Even if when I played good, it wasn't necessarily, always 100% good feedback. There was always something I could have learned. But sometimes I didn't want to hear that, whether it was a good game, being complimented, saying you had a good game is one thing. But when you have a bad game, the last thing I want to hear is my parent telling me I had a bad game, because the kid already knows, the athlete already knows he had a bad game, because we hear it from a coach already. We hear it with the teammates. The last thing we want to hear is from a parent. Although I will say that advice is great at the right time, but I wouldn't say, telling your kid he had a bad game or what he could be doing better immediately after the game. I don't think it's productive.
When would be the right time?
Well, I think when the child or the athlete actually wants to talk about the game. I think that they want to decompress afterwards, whether it was a good game or not. Everybody wants to talk about a good game. Everyone wants to talk about the good things that happened during the game. But if it wasn't good, I would wait for the child to bring up the game, or have that emotional support. Like, okay, but it's okay. Give them that reassurance that it's okay to have a bad game, or give them that I would say just that reassurance is great. Wait for them to engage in the conversation about the game.
Okay.
So not right after the game.
No. I mean, to me, it's just not productive. It wasn't productive even for the kids that I played with. So, and it would start immediately. Like once you get out of the locker room, I would hear parents either yelling at their kids or, storming out of the rink immediately. It's interesting what happens after the game, for sure.
Yeah.
It sort of leads me into one of the conversations that I hear about, at least from some of the kids that I've worked with, is like that car ride home.
yeah.
Like a
car ride.
And how that conversation can be so intense.
Mm.
Is that a little bit about, can you tell me a little bit about what that's like?
Yeah, the car rides, I mean, every parent, every athlete, professional athlete, it doesn't even matter. Everyone knows about the car ride. In my experience, my car rides were never that bad. Again, just being overcritical and what I could be doing better, but nothing that it was like a screaming match or anything that was of that nature. So I was very lucky. I know a lot of other kids that weren't so lucky.
I was gonna say, I've heard a lot of other stories.
I've heard horror stories. Yeah. And, it's when the game's over, right? There's nothing that you can do about it. The one thing you can do is maybe give a little bit of advice and give that reassurance. But whatever happened in that last game, there's nothing you can do. So I think that's like I said, just leave it be and wait for
my daughter. I have a forget about it mentality. Tell me 3 things you did great. Tell me 3 things you need to work on. And what are we doing tomorrow?
That's excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Right then. I mean, that should be on people's like notes right there. That saying right then, yeah, that's great feedback.
What you said something about every player knows whether they had a good or bad game after the game because their coach pretty much already told them, or they already know.
Oh yeah, they know.
In regards to the coach, what would their responsibility be at the end of the game? I mean, my guy's great game. I'll see you at practice on Wednesday. And pretty much, I always think I probably should work on my halftime pep talk and my end of game pep talk. But it's it really is, I'll see you at practice on Wednesday or Thursday or whatever it is. And then I walk away. Sometimes when I feel like we had a really good game and I should say something, and I'm like, guys, you did great. Enjoy the weekend. Take care. But I've seen other coaches on the sidelines, and I've seen those discussions, not so good. And then some of them a lot better. Some of them, they have all the parents around. What should we be doing during halftime or the end of the games that would have a positive impact on the children? Should we be reminding them of a bad game or?
No, well, I mean, I do think that having the coach's job is to coach. And that's what separates the parents from the coach. That's the last line of defense is the coach. So his job is to, he's like a general with his army. He's out there trying to do his best to lead and to, win games and so forth. I always thought that my favorite coaches were always the really positive ones, the really outgoing ones, the one that got everybody involved. Didn't pick favorites, everyone's there to perform. Everyone's there is there to have one goal, is to win a game. But I think that motivation before, after, in the middle, during is huge. I don't think coaches should be yelling in a game. I get it. In a game, I think that's what happens. That's never going to change. But I think what a coach can be doing is giving positive feedback no matter what. And again, what Mark said, the 3 is, what do you think, 3 things that you did good, 3 things that you didn't, do well in, and 3 things you want to improve on, if I said that right. I think that's very important, positive feedback. And then there's always room to get better.
So Christian, I played soccer competitively up until I had an injury, and I understand everything you're saying. My father was a coach, and I saw a change in his coaching. He took some class and came back and this is an improvement. My father's not on the field playing the game. He's not the one getting run down by, the fastest striker on the other team. He's not the one that has to make decisions that the coach can't remote control me, So for him to be that emotionally involved, for the win or loss, without thinking of improving the player, that wasn't the right approach. And I think we all, as coaches, need to learn that every game. Yeah. We're not out on the field, right? That win, that loss, we're there to help the team and give strategy and tactics and things, but we're not the ones. The heat's not on us, right? I
also think about coaches, to kind of give a little. It's like, how would I say it? To kind of take some pressure off the coach, leadership wise. That's why they have some of the kids as a captain, assistant captain, and so forth, which I think is important. Whether it's kids that don't get picked, that think they should get picked, or parents that feel like their kid is a leader, or the better one of the team, or so forth, they don't get picked. Some kids feel kind of bad about that, but I think the parents should also understand that there's captains for a reason. There's captains for let the kids be leaders instead of an adult, in a sense, so that way they have they feel more comfortable as well.
And they're on the field.
Yeah, exactly.
They're on the ice, right?
Yeah.
On their side.
I mean, I was a captain of 3 of my teams. 3 of my teams and assistant for 1. So 4 teams, I was a leader. So those kids look up to you to perform on the ice, and they look to the coach to see what we can do on the board. You know, he's got to fluctuate lines. He's got to organize everything. But the leadership really comes from the kid, you know, with that letter on his jersey as well.
Can I also add to the conversation about coaching a little bit?
Yeah.
So one of the things, my daughter was on a couple different gymnastics teams, and then was on and is now on a diving team. And to be perfectly honest, I think her diving coach is probably like a therapeutic coach. Unfortunately, I mean, not intentionally, but he just is. Unfortunately, Mia has had some really great coaching, and she's had some really, really bad coaching. And so there were a couple things as a parent that I was looking for, because I was never an athlete. I mean, not really. I swam a little, but we're not even going to go down that road. So, so when I was looking for different teams for her, one of the first things I was looking at was at the meets. I was looking at how the coaches were interacting with their athletes, because, you know, I saw coaches at meets. If their athlete didn't perform, they would actually turn their back on the athlete, or they would yell at them or be very punitive. And then if they scored high, they'd give them a hug. And so those coaches, that coaching, while they might turn out really high level athletes, I didn't want that for my daughter, because I was most concerned about her mental health. You know, athletics is great, but either way, I want her to be a healthy, well-adjusted adult at some point, but, you know, child. And so, go ahead.
As I say, as a coach, my team made it, every player on my team made it through tryouts. So there is some level of competency to be on my team. For me to be, you know, over celebrating or over criticizing any of my players I don't see that leading to a positive outcome. I see, you know, the ones that you're over criticizing, I've seen them, you know, I've seen other, you know, on my other teams that it crawl into a shell almost sometimes. You know, they'll stand out, they'll stay out of the circle of players, you know, if they felt like they didn't perform, or they were going to get overly judged for mistakes on the field.
Right.
And they're just as competent as other players on that field. It just was a bad day. You know, it's something like, so I agree with, you know, understanding that, you know, you got to coaches have to find a balance.
Right. And so the coach that she would perform the best for was the coach that, in terms of gymnastics, was the coach that she believed loved her. Now, this coach was tough, and she expected, you know, great things from my daughter. And Mia would try to meet those standards. But the only reason why she tried to meet those standards is because at the end of the day, she truly believed that this coach loved her.
Good to know. It's like earning respect, not demanding respect, right?
Right.
Right.
Right. And so unfortunately, some things shifted, and that the organization of that team ended up becoming difficult. So Mia left, and she went to another coach who she thought was just as tough, but who was more like used sarcasm and criticism, and Mia actually ended up quitting gymnastics because of the coach, because it felt bad to her every day going to practice.
Yep.
We talk a little bit about some of that in the presentation, but yeah, she felt so bad about going to practice, and she would come home crying every day because she felt belittled and like she could never get it right. So she ended up quitting gymnastics and moving into diving, and then after that realized, oh, this wasn't me, this was the coach, and I do really love gymnastics, but now it's too late to go back.
Yep.
One of the things that I noticed that Chris and even Leigh, like for one of the things we're pushing in South Jersey soccer is grassroots coaching education.
Mhm.
And a lot that they touch on is creating the a positive and a safe environment for the children.
Right.
So like we see that, but you also see, especially the U7, U8, U9, U10 coaches. These are the new coaches, the dad coaches that were volunteered into certain coaching positions. There was no coach available. What they do is they joystick the children during the game. Like, so it's like joystick coaching.
Mhm.
I understand what that.
So joysticking is pretty much you telling the player where to be, what to do. I mean,
okay. So you're okay.
Playing
Yeah.
a video game with the
Right,
the players.
Okay.
There's also a famous hockey, an ice hockey commercial where the dad put a voice recorder mechanism in his ear, and he was telling them where to be.
Yeah.
So even the parents, you see them, like you'll hear a coach. Like I try to train the kids at the games on how, like where they should be, like how I teach them the position.
Mhm.
I don't tell them, go get the ball right now, go do this, go do that.
Right.
But you do see, I'll be coaching, and then you will see a parent coach as well, like on the other end where they shouldn't be coaching.
Mhm.
What are like, how do we tell them, what you're doing isn't right? How could they create a safe, fun environment for their own kids rather than tell the kid how to play the game? You get that, I was all state in high school, I know what I'm doing. Well, then why aren't you coaching? I'm coaching. So what do you say?
I could tell you, teaching trapping and counters. I had to teach my parents what that meant. What a catch the offense offside, because the parents don't know what offside means. And it's they're yelling at their kid to get to the ball or to get to the player, and I'm like, no, leave the player alone, let them hang out back. Right when that play comes down, we get the ball back, possession. But it's it's exactly what you're saying, is they played something or thought they had the the insight in how their players should be on the field, and it's actually disruptive to my coach playing.
That brings me back to what Leigh's first question. What's important for the parent, to help your kid succeed? Learn the sport, learn what's going on in the sport. Screaming is not productive. None of it is productive unless it's a motivational drive, screaming go, or, what we call in hockey is called wheel. We hear coach screaming wheel. It's I would say 0 to 100, as fast as you can.
Crash, right?
Yeah, exactly. But when you have a parent screaming about something they don't know about, it's comical, so I would say definitely learn about the sport before putting your kid into it.
I know from my perspective as the mom, my kids would tell me they would be embarrassed if I was yelling.
Mm.
And I didn't ever want them to feel shame about what they were doing or about me as their mom. And so, but we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I always wanted to create an environment with my kids where they could tell me what they were thinking and feeling, and I would be responsive to that. Now, that's not me being permissive, but but I don't want them to be embarrassed or shamed while they're trying to perform. That's not going to help them.
And Leigh, to that point, that if they're embarrassed of you, they're not going to talk to you, right? Exactly. They don't want to be,
exactly,
give you information that might make them more embarrassed at another point, right? So it's one of the things. I've got 2 daughters, and I'm learning this now, that I should just be quiet most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to say the wrong thing, and I do say the wrong thing.
Don't fix it.
Exactly. Oh my!
Then don't fix it.
Everything in me is a fixer, so it's like silence is now. I've viewed that as a tool in my toolbox to fix things. Just quiet.
Right. I'm sorry you feel that way, honey. You might also use that in your marriage. That helps too. Anyway.
That's wisdom. that I didn't have.
All right.
So, yeah. So, okay. So then the only other question I had for you, and maybe that some of this has already kind of come out in the conversation, is what were some of the things that you've observed, like as an athlete, right, on the ice or even off the ice? What were some of the things that you observed from other adults that maybe made you feel uncomfortable to witness? Like, so it might not have been just your parents, it might have been other parents or coaches or spectators, or I mean, I can tell you, I mean, I played softball when I was young, and I mean, I was young, like middle school age. And I remember one of the dads was drunk and came into the batting. I don't even know the terms. That's how long ago this was. Non-athletic for him. But anyway, so he came into, no, it was the dugout. He came into the dugout and actually got into a fist fight with my coach. And I remember as a little kid, like sitting there going, oh crap, what do? I don't know what to do here. This is scary.
It's at the level of trauma for kids. I know players have talked to me about, I know an instance where a parent was intoxicated. The ref had asked him to leave the field. He left the field and stayed in the parking lot, yelling things from the parking lot. We had to call law enforcement to have him removed. How do you think that team feels with those parents, or that parent that would be like that? To me, I would just be uncomfortable anytime that would occur. I don't know how, to move forward from that. Like, how do you handle that?
Well, and if you think about too, in my story, this is 35 years later, at least. I don't want to do the math, but but I still remember who that dad was and who that player was. And that's what I remember of them. I was never close to her. So like, that's, I don't know. That was always something that stuck with me. So anyway, I'm throwing it out to you.
Man, there's a lot goes into that question. I'll start with I'll save the best for last. So I think, any sport really, especially contact sports, there's a type of vibe that goes on between parents. So what I noticed is when I was playing, I think it was more probably, so we started hitting in Pee-wee, so about Bantam, midget, just about. So it's like about like 14 to like 16, 17. That's when everything gets really like contact wise, and it gets a little crazy, especially in the stands. But I noticed about like cliques, like parent cliques, the parent that you stand next to every game, or the group of, I guess you can call them like groupies, a group of parents that they always stay together. But the parents that always stayed together, from my experiences, were with the most drama, the most gossip around other parents, gossip around even the kids themselves. And at that age, things come back in the locker room. We hear things, it can go be like little siblings overhearing something and telling, their other sibling that's playing. And we all hear it, or we hear about a fight that happened with the parents alone. And that gets in the locker room, and that throws the game off completely, especially with the athlete, if it's the parent. It could be about coach gossip as well. But parent cliques were definitely one of the things that were a thing, and it did cause a lot of problems. Also with that being said, parents feed off each other. So if one parent's screaming about one thing, the other parents will start screaming about another thing. So they kind of feed off each other, which is, I've seen it probably throughout my whole career. So yeah, it made it really uncomfortable. And it wasn't about like motivational pushing. It was just more about the bad stuff we were doing on the ice or weren't doing right. It was not much about, what we were doing good, unless we scored a goal or something. But That's what we would hear. Another thing that made us really uncomfortable. Parents, please stop screaming at referees.
Thank you.
Please, I beg you. I beg you for your kids. Just stop.
Christian, has a referee ever changed the call because a parent yelled at them?
No, absolutely not. No. I mean, I've seen so many parents get thrown out. I can't recall if my dad ever got thrown out. I can't really recall. He probably did, but I don't remember. Sorry, Dad. But I remember.
Well, Christian, that we're all human, right? So,
yeah.
I mean, we do have instincts to support our teams and our kids and everything. But at 100%. Some point, we're also raising our children.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember I played with this kid probably my whole career. Love him dearly. But his dad was a hothead. And I remember his dad getting kicked out of like 5 games in a season. And here's the thing. And so a lot of refs, I don't know about soccer. I'm not really too familiar with youth soccer. But a lot of the refs for ice hockey were like 16, 17.
Oh,
we have that issue too, Christian.
And
it's literally defined as they're afraid to take the whistle because of parents and coaches yelling at them,
and the coaches too. So I feel bad. I feel more bad for the refs than I do some of the kids sometimes, because these refs are getting mentally just beaten down. I mean, I've seen physical altercations happen with refs and coaches. I've seen physical altercations happen with parents and refs and coaches. So yeah, again, like you were saying, we're all human. Refs are human too. And no matter what the call is, it's not going to change. And it's not going to make the ref any better. If you have a bad ref, you have a bad ref for the rest of the game.
Right.
It's just the bottom line. You'll remember his face, so that way you could be prepared to, okay, it's going to be a rough one today, But
so that now, all right. So that's a great point. I tell my kids, I mean, you get this all the time. Like, and I can't stand when kids do that to refs. I'm like, don't you ever do that on this team. Don't ever play. I don't care if it's a good or bad call.
You see professional athletes doing it too.
Yeah.
And they see TV. Yeah. So they do see, I get that, but I still have my own discipline, and that's it. You don't ever question a referee, and there are bad ones. And I guess that's what you're saying. You know what, guys? This is going to be a bad day when it comes to refs. Don't depend on the ref. That's what I was always taught. You shouldn't be dependent on the ref for a win.
Play your game.
Yeah, and also think the next call. Do you think because you were, challenging the ref, that you're going to get the next call if it's something that's a decision type call?
Yes.
Because he's your friend now, or she's your friend now, because you were challenging him publicly on the field. Like, you have to really think about these things. It's like they're human too, as you said. And if it's let the play on or call the play because you challenge that ref, they may just say play on.
Yeah. Do you guys, I don't know about soccer, but I know in hockey, you argue with the ref, you can get like a double minor for unsportsmanlike conduct, or a 2 and a 10,
we call it dissent, right?
Yeah.
I'm actually pulling the numbers right now.
Keith, do we call it dissent for when the players also challenge the ref? I'm just used to talking to coaches that are.
Yeah, I'm only used to the coaches. Yeah.
Yeah, but the idea is they will get a card, a yellow card, second, depending on the severity. A red card is, you're off the field, and a suspension for the next, next 2 games. But yeah, there's at least stated no tolerance policy, but on game day, the ref may tolerate bad behavior just, because they're younger, and, they're being put in positions where they don't have the confidence to challenge the coach or the player, challenging them.
Right.
So in our league, we have roughly around, I would say 3,000 games, Mark. Is that what you think?
Yeah.
All right. So 3,000 games. Out of the 3,000 games, we have 60 red cards issued and 228 yellow cards issued. All right, I can guarantee you half of them are because of referee yelling at the ref.
Wow.
And I can guarantee you there should be 3 times that.
And that's even a crazier statistic because, all right, so the way the refs work in everywhere you go is they have an assigner, right? Their assigner is pretty much like their union shop guy, right? He's the boss. He assigns them to the games. Okay. He tells them, make sure you're documenting this stuff.
Yep.
So when they document it, the league forces to yell at the fines that come with it, the suspensions, that's where our job comes in at. So we'll have a conversation with an assigner. He's like, look, man, you guys aren't doing anything as a league. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Any yellow card that comes here, a red card that comes here, we're enforcing. Like we do. I have never once reversed a yellow card. You can't reverse them, right? So we think in our minds, that number is probably triple, probably even quadruple that amount.
More.
They
And
just
we've
don't
told
document.
assigners, we told assigners, card, do it. We expected it as a deterrence to bad behavior, and fully enabled by the league to say do this. I know this is kind of inside, not baseball, inside soccer, I guess, but the idea being that we need our refs to have confidence that they have our back anytime. But it's still, they're young guys, they're young ladies that are out there, and it's a challenge. I mean, I don't know if as a 16-year-old would I be able to stand in front of a burly, middle-aged coach and say, you got a red card. Me today, I would love to do it. you don't want me as a ref. But the teenagers that are just doing the weekend work and thinking that it's, I love soccer and I love, to be out in the field and I think I could do this, now they run up against, the coach that's, thinks they're playing, Premier League and they're not. It's a U9 game. These kids haven't even hit, their adolescence yet. So you don't even know what you're putting out in the field most of the time.
It's traumatizing.
Yeah.
Some of the complaints that we get as a league, I feel like ashamed, to even it's horrible. And especially towards the refs. So Chris, that's a great point that you bring up.
Yep. And I feel like every parent that's going to listen to this go, ooh, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds about right.
Even self-reflection on my own part too. I know, I was like, oh, why did you say that, Mark? Shut up.
It hits home. It definitely hits home.
So what do you say to a parent that is, or even a coach? Because I mean, in my case, I'm on the side. I've been coaching for 16 years now. I have been on the coaching side pretty much the entire time. I show up to these games, I'm screaming at my own children. That's what my dad taught me. His dad, all of our parents taught us that. All of their grandparents taught them that. How do I get help from that, Leigh and Christian? Like, what do I do? What's my responsibility in this as a parent, coach? All the parents are telling us we have issues as coaches for screaming at their kids. Is there help out there for us? Like, because we, as a league, I keep pushing education for coaches. Please go get coaching education. Some of them, they're like, I'm from a different country. Soccer is a religion to us. We know what we're talking about. How do we reach them? Like, is there an outreach for them that we can refer them to? Like, look, maybe you should get some help.
So I guess from my perspective, I look at it, I don't look at it as just this bubble, right? Like, there's definitely help for anybody who wants it, whether you're a parent, whether you're a coach, whether you're an athlete, whatever. And some of the help is not unique to any one of those roles either. Part of what needs to happen, and I do this when I'm, in just parenting work that has athletics aside, part of what I'm working with adults in doing is really becoming self-aware of what's being triggered within them. And I've had to do it myself as a mom, and I require the parents that I work with to do that as well. And really what's happening, it seems to me anyway, what's happening is we get so angry or get so big, right, in these moments because we're feeling so small or powerless. And I guess that's what it feels like on the side of the field or the ice or whatever. When the parents are on the side or when the coach is on the side, you really are powerless to help these kids do or perform or whatever. And I do genuinely believe that it's coming from a place of love and care. However, it doesn't end up being translated that way when we start yelling or joysticking or whatever. That's not what's being communicated to the child. And so we need to become aware of, hey, we're really reacting to our feelings of powerlessness, our feelings of being unable to help, and where that comes from in us and what that means. And really then start to focus on, okay, how can I work on building the relationship so that I can be more supportive to my student athlete, so that I can help them be the athlete, the best athlete that they can be, but also the best human that they can be. And like I said, I don't think it's just specific to athletics, although I think it plays a big part in it. And I think, like, when I would go back to that coach that was so awful to my own daughter, right? Or to the parents that are yelling from the side of the whatever. One of the things that I was looking at was like, oh, wow. So he's really getting bigger around my daughter because he feels like he's failing. And so because he was feeling like a failure as a coach, because he was determining that based on her performance, he then would become harsh or critical or mean to her so that he felt better as a coach.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, actually, it makes a lot. It goes back to I know it's a quip I make, but they're not in the Premier League, right? They're not in the MSL. They're not, but there's a feeling that
they are.
That's the,
they are.
But well, talking about the parent coaches, right?
Right.
Where they see this as almost an identity, and they're trying to counter what I call imposter syndrome. I in my own experience, I'm now a coach. Well, okay, now I'm really worried. Now I got to think about, did I do the sets right? Did I do, and now everyone's judging me, and it's not really about me at all, right?
No,
Right. So I
But
see that as,
if you're feeling like a failure, or you're like your team lost, and so then you're dealing with feelings of being a failure. Not that you are or aren't. I'm just saying,
we all do. I sincerely believe every one of the coaches, even the best coaches that have the perfect, teams that are 100-0, they feel like they didn't do something right. But
right. And so then we can't take that out on the kids or expect the kids to make us believe that we are successful or that we are good enough or powerful enough or whatever. So yeah. I think really taking the time to look at what we're bringing to the table and what's being triggered in us will help us to be more, to go back to Chris's word, present, will help us to be more present with our athlete so that we can then provide them the support that they need in the most appropriate way that they need it.
So I have a question for you, Leigh.
Oh boy.
So why do parents get so activated about their son or daughter's athletic performance?
I think that's it. I think that they are trying to show, I think that we as parents, and I guess coaches too, we as parents develop who we are. Are we a good enough parent? Are we lovable? Are we important? Do we matter based on the way our kids perform out in the world, in athletics, in school, in, with their peers. And so they're sort of like a reflection of us. And if we see that they're not performing in a certain way, it's almost like we feel like a big spotlight has just shone on us to say, hey, you haven't been a good enough mom, and this is why. And so then if I react to that feeling, that uncomfortable feeling of, hey, I'm a bad mom, then I'm going to get bigger so that my kid will get smaller. But in the long run, that doesn't actually help our kids develop a good sense of self.
That's my kind of next question is, are there long-term effects on children that are getting yelled at by their children, by their coaches? Like, is it like in a negative manner?
Absolutely. Well, there's definitely long-term effects of trauma and abuse.
Okay.
And so one of the slides, if we can jump to actually one of the slides, 15, actually, that one has an image. So this is just a sort of, it's a powerful image, and it's gross neglect, right? So there's a difference in that, but it is a powerful image that shows, this is on the left side, an image of a healthy brain of a 3-year-old that has had good enough caregiving. And on the right side, that's a brain of a 3-year-old who has been neglected and abused.
Same scale?
Yeah. Neglect, abuse, and trauma changes the brain, changes the way that the brain develops, and changes the way that the brain functions. And in childhood, you have the largest amount of development happening, right? So you have 0 to 3, then you have 3 to 6, then you have 6 to like 12, and then 12 to 25. You have these like developmental stages, right? And the earlier in development, when our children are experiencing trauma in some way, whether it be through sports, parenting, whatever, it will change the way that their brain develops. Why is that important? We do have neuroplasticity, so our brain is changeable. However, the earlier on that someone experiences abuse or neglect in whatever form, the harder it is to change, because it's earlier in developmental stages, because our brain develops in a hierarchical fashion. So as it develops, it's always going to develop with like Swiss cheese.
May I say like an onion?
Foundation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One of the, there are the next slide, the slide right before this, slide 13. There are some actual, there is some research on what actually changes in the brain. And so these, just to read through some of it, like there's a decreased size of the corpus callosum, and that's that structure that goes, it's like fibers between the two hemispheres, and we need it to be able to transfer messages back and forth across the brain. And in children who are abused and neglected, or adults who are abused and neglected, that corpus callosum is smaller. And so it means that communication between left and right hemisphere of the brain is harder to accomplish. There's a decreased size in the hippocampus, which has effects on learning and memory. The prefrontal cortex is actually can be 25% smaller, and the prefrontal cortex is responsible for abstract thought, logic, reasoning, being able to come up with. It's sort of like our brain's output center. It's like, if something happens to us, how are we going to handle that? And if we can't think through or rationalize through, we're going to use reactive strategies of handling something instead of using something that is more coming from a regulated place and more useful in a stressful situation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other thing too that I want to point out in this is that the amygdala, and the amygdala is important because in the amygdala, it's sort of our alarm bell center. So it's where our brain determines if something is safe or not safe. And so if we've experienced trauma throughout early childhood or throughout, childhood, our amygdala actually, so our prefrontal cortex shrinks and our amygdala gets bigger, which means that we are hearing alarm bells more often than are actually necessary.
Wow.
So is that a physiological definition of trauma or like PTSD? I'm thinking, is that you've
Oh, absolutely. I didn't put in here, but I actually have brain scans of a brain that is a traumatized brain, like an adult that is has had trauma, and one that hasn't. And there are different parts of the brain that actually light up.
Wow.
Or don't light up, I should say. Like there's so much that is offline. So depending on what we do or how we do it, really can affect not just the moment, that present moment, but it can have cascading effects for our children throughout their life. And so when I'm working with parents, sorry,
You're good.
When I'm working, I feel like I'm taking over.
Doing
When I'm
great.
working with parents, one of the things that I am constantly trying to teach them for all of this, and Mark, this goes back to a couple statements that you have made, and Keith, to some of what you have made too, is that it is so important for us as parents to be able to be that safe place for our kids, to be able to provide an accepting place where they can go if ever they need anything. So I don't want to, as a mom, I don't want them to feel like they can't come to me under any circumstance, because I want, like, as they get older, horrible things can happen. And I don't want them to feel like they're alone in that. And so if I set up parenting strategies that are more critical or more harsh in nature throughout their childhood, they won't be able to come to me when, maybe big things happen. Yeah. So one of the therapeutic approaches that I practice a lot is something called dyadic developmental psychotherapy. And in that model, there is a way that we want to be as parents, and it's PACE. We want to be playful, accepting, curious, and empathic. And if we can have a PACE attitude, then we can help our kids get through anything, not by giving them the answers, not by fixing it for them, but by helping them to learn and explore and grow their critical thinking structures. Right?
Leigh, I totally agree. When I was told we were having a daughter, right? The doctor, it's a baby girl. That was a earthquake in my thinking, and I'm thinking, okay, now I have to readjust everything I think, because I have no idea what I'm doing. I look at my approach to coaching or being involved in my child athlete as an opportunity to open up that communication with her, not a way for me to remote control her and live vicariously what I used to be on the field through her, but a way that says, you know what, this is a way I can talk to my dad, right? I don't necessarily share in as they grow into adolescence, the different challenges they'll have now, but this at least gives me a place where we can talk about things, good, bad, ugly, but let her, drive that, and me be someone she can trust to talk to about it. I just saw it as an opportunity instead of me wanting to, there are others, oh yeah, Molly, you should have. And I'm like, all right, don't say it, just think it.
Right. And you know what? Because to Chris's point too, I think they know it. They know what they could have done or should have done or whatever. Like, they know it. But I don't need to like shine a spotlight on them and make them feel small for not doing it.
Yeah. So use this time to actually build that relationship, that she can use this to talk to me about other important things and never feel like she's alone or she doesn't have me in her life as something of value.
Absolutely. And so this is the other takeaway as a mom that I would like people to know, is because I had always tried to maintain that kind of relationship with my daughter. When she had the abusive coach, he was then able to come to me and tell me about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we were able to handle it and deal with it. Because if she hadn't, or if she hadn't felt like she could, that could have been awful.
Yeah.
This is a lot of information. I'm just Googling stuff here while we're talking. Leigh, is there any educational books that you know of that would benefit like our audience, to where we could tell them, hey, read this book, or just about this information, something that's tailored more towards a coach or a parent athlete?
I'm not sure that I have something specifically tailored towards a coach or an athlete. I do know there is a book called Parenting from the Inside Out by a man named Dan Siegel. And that book was really instrumental for me as a mom. But, whenever I present, and I present all the time to clinicians and parents and different things. But, my sort of tongue-in-cheek joke is that, if you have kids, if you know kids, if you might run into kids at the grocery store, they're going to trigger stuff in us that we don't realize is really even there. And so if we can get really connected with what we're bringing to the table, then we don't have to react to what we're bringing to the table, and we can be more present for those kids and actually meet the needs that they're expressing. So that book, Parenting from the Inside Out, is amazing for parents, coaches, refs, whoever.
Thank you.
Might be working with them. The other thing too, I just kind of wanted to touch on is there are different, so those are some things that can happen outside of like a clinical office. Inside of a clinical office, there are ways that you can work on either building esteem, building confidence, building sort of resources for the athlete through EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
So Leigh, is this a good time to talk about the Center for Dynamic Growth and the services? I see that Christian is also a neurofeedback specialist there too. So some of the things that, with the Emdr and other, sure, great.
Yeah. So we do this here, and it can be here, it could be other places, but we do practice EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's typically a trauma treatment. So if they've had those experiences, so like my daughter did have to go through some EMDR therapy to process the criticalness and the abusiveness of her coach, right? When she went through that EMDR process, that's when she realized that it was that she hadn't actually fallen out of love with the sport. It was that her coach made it so painful for her to be in the sport.
So are some of the other things, would that be like, I think we have a return to play kind of issue we're having after COVID. Some players feel left out of the team experience because they took that time off. And I kind of feel like that's traumatic, but I don't know how to really know how to quantify it or explain it, but
it's absolutely traumatic. I actually just recently worked with a college-aged soccer athlete, and she actually had gotten a concussion, and actually I think multiple concussions. And when she returned to play, she wasn't the same because the effects of the concussion alter your brain.
Delayed, yeah.
Right. And so this is a couple years. So she ended up quitting soccer. This was a couple years later, and she was still struggling with the trauma of how she couldn't perform like she had before. And so there are different pieces. There's the trauma of the injury. There's also the trauma of the effects of the injury. So, and then the effects of loss of the friendships and the relationships, and, all that develops in that, because you become, as an athlete, I know, at least for my daughter, her world became about her team, not necessarily about her community or school. Right.
Yeah.
So in that regard, when she quit the team because of the coach, she lost those relationships, or the level of
part of her identity. Yeah. I've tried to explain to my daughters that we have facets, and some facets, you need to nurture. Some, you have to pay attention to others more than the ones you actually want to pay attention to. So, but I see this return to play. Children are afraid to come back to teams, and it's just. I think it's in general it happens, but now that we had that time off, then it's like, how do you get the players back? How do you get them back to safety, or thinking it's safe within the team environment?
So then the other piece too is something we also do something at Center for Dynamic Growth called neurofeedback, and I'm not going to try to pretend like all neurofeedback is equal, because I don't believe it is. However, there is a lot of there are a lot of articles out there that can be discussed, or I can share or whatever,
Sure.
but that talk about how neurofeedback can help athletes with peak performance. So we can do, with neurofeedback, you can help with that, but there's also ways that neurofeedback can help with trauma. And that's ultimately, that was how I got into the world of neurofeedback, because I have this large trauma background, right? And so that was where I was first starting, but then I got into more of like the peak performance. But then also, it doesn't have to necessarily go to the level of trauma so much as, if we've had these kids that are now so wrapped up in, I have to perform and I have to perform to this level, we end up with an anxious kid. And that doesn't help them be successful as an adult, or, even as a kid. So we can learn to help them sleep better. We can learn to help them calm their system better, really regulate their system.
That's excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Oh, and also, Keith, there's another book too by Dan Hughes, that will help parents, coaches to learn about PACE, the playful, accepting, curious, and empathic. And he has a lot of books that are more geared towards a significantly traumatized child. But he has one book that's out that talks about how to be with your, typical child, just how to have this attitude with your typical child. And it's, I think it's attachment focused parenting, effective strategies for caring for children, or something like that is the name of the book.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is great. I've learned a lot from this, Leigh and Christian. Thank you for coming on our show.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we'll send you guys Mark, we'll edit this and we'll send it out to you just before we post it all over. And, whenever you just want to come on, if there's anything that you see, that you want to talk about, let us know.
How do you so we're sort of like off script at the moment.
Yeah.
Are you feeling like we hit all the points that you wanted to hit and made it interesting?
I think it's great.
I'm thinking if there's more to talk about from this discussion, and if you are ever available, there are some ideas I have that come from this. We need to find civility on this field, but I keep saying it's civility, but is that because parents, coaches, we're talking about not being big or feeling as if they have to, how do we progress with that as something instructional, informational to our coaches, parents, players.
I think we left out the statistics part about it.
Statistics. I would like to go into that, because in the US grassroots model, they show parents and coaches, U14, you're going from like 5 million kids playing soccer down to 1 million.
Oh, it drops like crazy. It's like 75% of athletes.
And the reason why is the parents are just it's too much for them on the sidelines. It really is. And some of the stuff that he's touched on makes perfect sense. What's going on?
Yeah.
It's just going to have to be a balance, but you don't want parents to feel beat up by us.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we want them to hear it. We want them to listen. So how can we do that, or package it in a way that feels constructive and not critical?
I think this entire thing was constructive. That all this slide I'm looking at right now, people need to see this.
Yep. And I feel like it should be discussed. I mean, throughout, once a kid signs up for intramural or any type of sport, as as a little kid, once they sign up, there should be something like this that should be discussed, PowerPoint or something, and like Leigh, a clinician, and maybe a former athlete or whatever. That's as a basis off of this to explain to the parents what.
I think
not
he
to
just
do.
created a job for himself.
I think so. Now you're a parent. Now you're the parent of a child athlete.
we can. So, one of the benefits of COVID is we all learned about how to have remote conferences, and we normally have a coaches meeting. Now we can do a parent meeting where we bring them all in on our Zoom account and we show them, look, we understand that you love your kids. We love your kids. We love our kids. We have kids in this. We coach kids. But we have people like Leigh and Christian on here telling us yelling at them is not the right way to go. And here are some things that we can do to be proactive.
And I want to add to that I've heard other parents tell me that it's, it's a handful of parents, right? It's not my entire it's not every family. It's a handful of parents, and they don't know how to communicate to those parents on the sideline to say, back off, this is, so how do we, that was to Leigh's point about, we don't want to come top down, we're not, dictatorial or whatever about, about what we're talking about. I think we have support of, I would say, the majority of parents to say, we're kind of tired of it too. And how do we coexist with that? So I know some parents that have told me, how can we reduce the volume?
Well,
I'm seeing that on this.
A Zoom call definitely would help.
Yeah.
So the way we have 2 seasons, so we have plenty of time from now until March. It's normally the first weekend in March. Through these podcasts is the way we're trying. All the podcasts we're doing are really all geared towards what we're doing right now. We had the head referees on. We had U.S. education on. Yeah, we had, and this is a big part of. We're trying our hardest to change the sideline, and that what Mark says, even as a coach and as an admin from a league standpoint, for me personally, I get embarrassed for other people's behavior, and I feel embarrassed for them. So how do I engage them? Because I feel like if I say something, it might even make it worse. Like, am I supposed to say something?
I think you can say something, but what I find effective is not saying something about their specific behavior, but to acknowledge what they're feeling underneath that. So like saying to them, wow, it seems like you really feel powerless to help your kid.
Yeah, there you go. That's a cliche. I'm going to put that in my.
If you could acknowledge that, and then you can, so acknowledge that, connect with them that way. And then that offers them the opportunity to look at what they're doing or saying, but respond to you, and then just respond again in pace. Like, wow, you feel really powerless to help your kid. And then they will say something like, yeah, I can't believe they're not making it.
It's just like de-escalating everything, especially with that type of behavior.
Would you both be willing to talk about pace at another session?
Yeah.
Is that?
Sure. Yeah.
It sounds like something that would be applicable to our situation. I'm just asking. It's piquing my interest now. So
it's not, I have to make
okay.
it's not my model, like it's somebody else's model, but yes, I can talk about how I use it and how I use it with parents and how I teach parents and stuff like that.
Great.
Thank you.
So thank you again.
Over statistics real quick.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's going to be on slide 4. So as it says, research shows that 75% of athletes drop out of the sport by 13 to 16 years of age. Average child today spends less than 3 years playing a sport, quitting by age 11. And annually, 44 million children participate in youth sports annually.
So
but
75% of them
that number
drop
drops.
out.
Yep.
Yeah.
As for me personally, I sustained a really bad concussion. I got hit really hard. I was actually knocked out unconscious. I think I was probably like 12 years old. And that took me out of the sport for about a year or two. So that could also be based off injuries, or they don't want to be participating in the sport, or maybe they fall out of love with it, or it can be parent-based, coach-based. Those numbers all have relatively could be all in those.
I would love to talk about how do we get those kids back? How do we get, your road to recovery? I broke my ankle when I was in high school and had suffered from side effects from that to this day. But, I know same things happening with kids. Your 12-year-old is getting a concussion or a fracture, and in general, maybe just not coming back because there's too much pressure and they're just not it's not the sport that they started out in rec, but how is there a way that we can get them back
Like
in any sport?
neurofeedback, we can actually remediate the concussion.
Oh, wow.
And so we do that a lot here.
I'm doing that now.
Oh, that's excellent.
Years later.
I'm doing that now. So
That's great. Yeah. Do you still play ice hockey, Christian?
so I'm not on a team. Like once I find a men's league, before I was bartending, so the games would usually be at night. So I usually work nights, but now that I'm working mornings, once I find a league, then yeah, I'll be back on the ice. But I play like pickup games and so forth, like open hockey.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm still on the ice. I'm still doing my thing. But
Do you referee at all?
no. So I wanted to referee when I was younger. Like I said, I just saw the abuse that those refs get on a daily basis. So I probably would now, now that I understand.
Yeah.
But I don't think they pay that much. So, but coaching, I would be interested in maybe down the line though, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming on our show. I think this is great.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
All right.
I'll see you. Have a nice day. Have a nice rest of your weekend, guys.
Monday.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks.
All right. I think that went awesome, Mark.
Wow, this is I'm thinking in my head. Well, I'm thinking it is definitely high quality discussion. So we've had 3 high quality discussions, and I'm amazed that it just kind of happens. You can find people that talk about their area of expertise and how it aligns with what we're going through as a league.
I'm trying to get Bobby Convey on for our next one. I have a highly hot topic where I do have a guest that would like to come on. I just don't think we're ready for it. I don't bring that heat on us as a league either, especially right now we have the run and meet situation and then the US club with the safe sport situation.
Yep.
I'd like to put that stuff to rest first and then bring in other topics. But this was awesome. Answered all of my questions, and it's more like she was more of an educate. I want to go into like, give me I'm gonna go stab one of the parents. She goes into the whole professional part of it, and it's we just have to connect the dots now when we edit.
Yeah, because we want those parents. I mean, we don't want the heat. We don't want belligerent back of or we don't want one but you want the parents that are motivated, and we just gotta turn that into a positive, because there's the parents, a lot of the times those parents that are the most active on the sideline are the ones that are most active during the week. They're the ones that get the for Cherry Hill kick or treat, they're the ones driving the costumes kind of thing. They're the ones getting booster type activities for the team. So it's kind of a catch-22 where we want to say, I'll get rid of them all, but then you're like, well, a lot of these parents are really, they care. It's just we've got to change some of the tone, or the I keep calling it heat, because it's like you feel your face flush when I'm on the sideline and a parent yelling at a ref or yelling at their kid, and you're like, oh, just stop.
I had a parent. I wanted to bring it up. I had a parent the other, like one of the last weeks in the girls' league too. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, right?
I could tell you some stories about the girls' league. Coaches
they're yelling at the ref about the get back line, and he's right. The parent was right. The ref was wrong. But I'm like, dude, like texting the parent, it doesn't matter. Just please stop talking to the ref. Please disengage. And it's they're out of body experiences for me. I get very uncomfortable with them.
And it actually disassociates yourself from those people. You don't want, they could be the best player, the nicest player, but then you're like, you know what, this parent's been yelling so much, I can't actually be seen, just kind of being friendly, because now the ref's going to see me, right? I don't want to be like that, but we have to maintain our composure and our kind of our position as as coaches. And you got someone who flies off the handle. We've got it's a really hard spot to be in, and hopefully talking to Leigh and others about how to do that. I like the idea of and so now you're a parent of a child athlete. What are your responsibilities? What are the resources you can do? Will you ever win that argument with a coach or a ref, right? What are the things not to say to a ref? Anything.
Yeah.
Just kind of lay that out. I don't know if any parent would actually look at it that would be, that would already be, responsive to it. But the idea being is there's no set of rules. It's like when you have a kid, no one gives you a rule book. Right? How do you live this? How do I do my day to day?
I think so I have to leave and go cut a tree down, and it's going to be about an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Have fun.
Yeah. So do you want to meet up again today? We don't have to release this right now. I don't want you to take the time out of your family day, but
I figured today, tomorrow. You got to do if you want to do the intro and outro. Just a couple seconds, man. It doesn't have to be a whole.
I was going to take her website picture, the Center for Denying, put that in there, put our banner in there, and maybe have it like twirl a little bit, some music.
Awesome.
And then
YouTube creator will let me kind of splice it all together and take the pieces out that the opening piece was just kind of us getting situated. They'll let me put it together as a kind of a cohesive presentation. And I would like just as a matter of keeping them engaged with us, that Leigh and Christian have a review of it. It was great. And I hope we can get them on.
Remember the one song, the intro of the song was, "Hey, you kids, get off my lawn." Remember that? It's like, "Who? There it is." I'm going to try to find that. I was thinking that could be like right in the front, "Hey, you kids," and then have like some real nice music in the background or something after that. But all right.
We'll see.
I'll work on the intro and the outro, and I'll get that to you by the end of tonight. And then if you want to meet up again with me this weekend, because we could just, once we get it, it's there, Yeah.
No, that's the beauty of recording it. Like you could do 10 of these and then just clean them up, make them, and then just put them on a scheduled release. I still think we need to do live for engagement, even though our engagement's low. But quantity and quality of content is right now my priority, not necessarily engagement. Engagement comes when you build that body of work, in my opinion.
Yeah, we just keep posting and posting, and it'll come.
Keep doing what we're doing.
From now until next year, it's going to be a whole nother thing. We just got to get some. I want to get an old head. Actually, it would be nice, like that.
Jim.
Jim Miller would be perfect.
Yeah.
Some of them stories that he could tell us, like that guy, he's probably like a human, like historian.
Between coaching in the 70s or I guess before that, because he was on the board in the 70s. So
it seems like it has like its ups and downs, like because like it seems like they like out of nowhere they create stuff and then it disappeared, and then they created stuff and then it disappeared. So it's like, I want to know, are we missing people from the board that want to be a part of this still, like that are still around?
Yeah.
Like some of those previous presidents, where are they?
Yeah. Where's the emeritus, right. Where's the longevity?
Nice to get on.
Yeah, and get this, kind of put to bed the idea that, it was a hostile takeover, because it wasn't. It was just an election, Yeah. So those conversations are kind of important, I think. And I'm glad we got a forum to do it. It doesn't have to be like, we could talk to our membership and anyone else who's listening. It's just interesting.
Okay, but all right, man. I'm gonna go cut a tree down.
Have fun. Pick a winner.
You guys have a nice day, all right? I'll see
Did you watch Christmas Vacation yet?
No.
Yeah,
I'll put that on while we're putting the tree in. I don't
There you
really
go.
have to watch it though.
Oh wow. This is the tree. Make sure you bring your chainsaw.
I do have a chainsaw. That's a good idea. I should.
All right, man.
I'll see you, pal. Take care.
Talk to you.